Hey y'all, it is Sage Brickman. I'm going to be doing a demonstration today that I'm actually very excited for regarding atmospheric scintillation. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the science behind it because I know that y'all just sat through that whole presentation, but I am going to cover just the basics in case anybody didn't understand or wasn't listening. We're going to go over just the easy stuff again. So atmospheric scintillation is what occurs when light from space, like a star, comes through our atmosphere and then refracts. Once it's in our atmosphere, it refracts off of air pockets, wind currents, and different air densities and just particles in our air. And as it comes through and refracts, it blurs a little bit and it dims a little bit in places, and it appears to be flickering or temporarily dimming, and it looks like twinkling. Obviously I'm not gonna be able to replicate everything to the T here because we don't have a vacuum. I do have a vacuum actually. I do use a vacuum in this, but not like a space vacuum that has no air or particles in it. I don't have the time or the energy to recreate one of those in my room. So what we'll be using instead, we're going to be using a clear jar. And then to demonstrate our atmosphere coming in, because we're going to be using a jar like this that has kind of a pattern on the outside. This way we can kind of capture the refracting of the light. And we are also going to be using, to capture the dust particles swirling around in our air, kitty litter and the top part of a vacuum. If you disconnect the little suction cup part of the vacuum and just use the top part, you can kind of blow it up through a cheesecloth. If you just elastic band a cheesecloth on top, you can pull it up and the kitty litter swirls around the jar and doesn't actually get suctioned up into the vacuum, just continues swirling, which is exactly what we're looking for in this experiment. The fourth thing on top of the two jars, the cotton, the cheesecloth, and the vacuum, is going to be these button lights. We have two of them, one of them for our clear jar, one of them for our pattern jar, and both of them, as you can see, neither of them flicker beforehand. That is very important. You do not want a flickering light beforehand because it kind of defeats the purpose of the experiment if your star is already twinkling. Yeah, so for setup, you've got, if you put the button light in the clear jar, put a lid on or something, that's the setup for that one. The setup for the atmospheric jar is a little bit more difficult just because you have to get kitty litter from the bag into the jar without getting it all over your floor. I did get it all over my floor. I'm not getting it all over my floor again. You can imagine what me putting the kitty litter in the jar looks like. I think you've got it. Yeah, once you've put the kitty litter in the jar, take some cheesecloth, just a thin piece. You don't need a big piece, just enough that the thicker particles of the kitty litter don't fall through, and thin enough so that the air from the vacuum can still go in. I elastic band it on top. Just use an elastic, stick it on top, and that should be good to go. So we'll hop to the demonstration now. Okay, what we can take away from this demonstration is that as the kitty litter and the particles in our atmosphere swirl around the inside of the jar or swirl around in our air and kind of cover up and blur over the source of light or the light coming off of that source, there is not only a dimming and twinkling sensation in the jar, but also on the wall reflected next to the jar. This is a good way to look at the light reflecting off because a lot of the times that we see light in our world coming off of stars, it is reflecting off of different surfaces. This compares to the light in the clear jar because even though that the jar was not a perfect example of a vacuum, because it did have air in it and it was a little bit smudged, there was no twinkling, no effect on the light. It was a good control to, to see the difference between the twinkling star and the non-twinkling star. Yeah, so in the future, when you are looking up at the stars and you are seeing them twinkle and shine, just think that out in space, they are actually just huge balls of gas that are flaring and shining and producing a steady light that travels millions of billions of miles to reach our planet and then distort at the last 10 seconds of their journey. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot.